You have said the words. You have whispered them in the middle of the night when the house was silent and the weight of the world felt heavy on your chest. You have shouted them in moments of pure desperation. You have written them on sticky notes and placed them on your mirror and carried them in your pocket like a sacred reminder. By his stripes I am healed. You believe these words are true. You know exactly where they come from. But as you look at your life, and as you feel the persistent ache in your body or the lingering fog in your mind, there is a gap. There is a wide and cold canyon sitting between that ancient promise and your current reality. You feel as though you are doing everything right. You follow the steps, and you maintain the posture, and you speak the language. Yet nothing shifts. The mountain remains exactly where it was yesterday. What if the problem isn't your faith? What if it isn't even the words themselves? What if there is a missing key that has been hidden in plain sight this entire time? It might be something so simple, but we often walk right past it in our frantic rush to be better. There is a reason this feels like a living reality for some people and yet feels like an empty echo for others. There is a reason the words sometimes fall flat, while other times they seem to move heavens. Today we are going to bridge that gap. We are going to explore why the repetition has felt empty and how to find the connection you have been searching for. Maybe nothing is actually missing. Maybe it is simply waiting to be understood. We live in an age of constant repetition. We are told by every corner of our culture that if we simply say something enough times, it will eventually become our truth. We have started to treat spiritual principles like a vending machine in a dark hallway. We put in the verse and we press the button and we stand there waiting for the result to drop into our hands. But the human heart is not a machine, and it does not respond to mechanical input. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to believe. It is a quiet and heavy doubt that sits at the back of the mind when the lights go out. You feel like a hypocrite. You say you are healed, but you are still in pain. You say you are whole, but you feel broken in a dozen different places. You look at the people around you who seem to have it all figured out, and you wonder what they know that you do not. This disconnect creates a friction that wears you down over time. It makes the very act of prayer feel like a chore or a test you are failing. You start to wonder if you are doing it wrong, or if you simply do not have enough faith to make the engine start. You ask yourself if you are not good enough to see the change, or if you are missing some secret level of holiness. This is the struggle of the modern believer. We have all the information in the world at our fingertips, but we are missing the internal connection. We are using the map, and we are studying the terrain, but we haven't actually started walking the path. We are shouting at the storm to stop while our own hearts are still shaking with fear. The words are right, but the melody is off. We are trying to force a harvest without ever tending to the soil of our own souls. It is a weary cycle of hope and disappointment. You reach for the promise, and then you recoil when the physical evidence stays the same. This back and forth motion creates a spiritual fatigue that makes you want to stop trying altogether. But the frustration you feel is not a sign of failure. It is actually a sign that your spirit knows there is more than just these empty sounds. It is a signal that you are ready to move past the surface and into something much deeper. To understand where we are going, we have to look back at the foundation. The phrase, "By his stripes we are healed," is not just a modern slogan or a catchy hook for a song. It is a historical and spiritual marker that stands as a testament to an exchange. In its simplest form, it points to a specific moment in time where suffering was traded for peace. It suggests that the physical and emotional weight we carry today was already addressed and accounted for a very long time ago. It is a statement of a finished work rather than a request for a new one. But when we look at this verse in our current world, we often overcomplicate it. We turn it into a legal formula or a rigid contract. We think we are reminding a distant and preoccupied power of a signed agreement that they might have forgotten. In reality, the verse is an invitation to come closer. It is a doorway that stays open regardless of how we feel. It is not a magic spell intended to force a change in the physical world through the sheer volume of our voices. Instead, it is an observation of a reality that exists beyond what we can see with our physical eyes. It is a reminder that you are not alone in your struggle and that your pain is not invisible. It is a calm and steady hand on your shoulder saying that this burden has been shared and the price has been paid in full. When we strip away the complex theology and the loud arguments, we are left with a simple truth. The healing mentioned here is not just about a body that works perfectly, but about a soul that is returned to its original design. Keeping this clear and calm is essential. If we treat the verse as a weapon to beat back our symptoms, we often end up exhausted from the fight. But if we treat it as a resting place, we begin to see it differently. It is not a goal we are running toward, but a ground we are standing on. It is the solid earth beneath our feet that stays firm, even when the wind starts to blow. When you say the words, you are not trying to create something out of nothing. You are simply agreeing with what has already been established in the quiet of eternity. So if the verse is true, why the silence? The missing key is often found in one single word, and that word is alignment. There is a profound difference between saying a word with your mouth and actually inhabiting a truth with your soul. Most of us speak from our intellect because that is how we were taught to learn. We have a mental understanding of the promise, and we know the definitions, and we know the history. But the mind is not where the deepest change happens. Imagine a person who says they are not afraid of heights while they are shaking at the very top of a ladder. Their words are saying one thing, but their entire being is screaming something else. Their body and their spirit are not aligned with the sounds coming out of their mouth. When we repeat "by his stripes I am healed," while our heart is gripped by the paralyzing fear of staying sick, we are creating a house divided. We are trying to build a massive structure on a foundation made of panic. The words then become a shield we use to hide our fear, rather than a bridge to our peace. True change begins when the heart stops trying to convince the mind and starts to rest in a deeper knowing. It is the difference between reciting a poem and being the person the poem was written about. We often approach these words as a way to persuade a distant power to look our way. We think that if we say it enough or with enough intensity, we will finally catch the attention of the divine. But alignment is about realizing you already have that attention. It is a gentle process of bringing your inner world into harmony with the words you speak. It means looking at the fear and the doubt and the pain without letting them lead the conversation. When you align, you are not fighting against your symptoms as much as you are settling into a truth that is larger than them. It is a shift from trying to make something happen to realizing that something has already happened. This is not about mental pressure or forcing a thought to stay in your head. It is about the quiet realization that the words are not just sounds, but a description of your true state. Think of it as having two distinct ways of seeing the world around you. We can call them the two eyes. The first eye looks at the natural world and the physical reality you inhabit every single day. It sees the symptoms on the skin, and it reads the medical reports, and it feels the heavy fatigue in the limbs. This eye is not evil, and it is not wrong. It is simply reporting what is happening in the physical realm of time and space. If you have a broken arm, this eye sees the cast and the limitation. The second eye, however, looks through a completely different lens. This is the eye of trust and spiritual perception. It does not ignore the broken arm, but it sees the power that is currently knitting the bone back together in the dark. It sees the invisible process of life and restoration that the first eye cannot yet grasp. The missing key is often found in the fact that we try to use the first eye to prove what the second eye should be seeing. We want our physical senses to give us permission to believe. We want the pain to stop before we decide that the promise is true. But the spiritual process is actually reversed. We must learn to look with the eye of trust so clearly and so steadily that the physical world eventually begins to respond to that inner gaze. It is not about denying your reality or lying to yourself about how you feel. It is about acknowledging a higher reality that exists simultaneously with your struggle. When these two eyes come together, you are no longer caught in a tug-of-war between what you feel and what you say. You acknowledge the symptom with the first eye, but you anchor your soul in the truth with the second eye. This creates a balance that allows you to walk through the fire without being consumed by the heat. You are no longer waiting for the physical world to change so that you can have peace. You are bringing the peace of the second eye into the chaos of the first. There was a man who understood this balance between the two eyes better than almost anyone in modern history. He was not a man of high titles or academic degrees. He was a simple plumber from the north of England who spent his days fixing pipes and tending to the practical needs of his neighbors. His name was Smith Wigglesworth, and he became a living testament to what happens when a human being refuses to let the natural world have the final word. When we talk about him today, we are not looking at a superhero or a myth, but at a person who decided that the words of the ancient text were more real than the air he breathed. Wigglesworth was known for a faith that seemed almost aggressive to those who did not understand his heart. He would often say that he was not moved by what he saw or by what he felt, but only by what he believed. This was not a hollow catchphrase for him. It was the very breath in his lungs. If you look closer at his life, you see that his intensity was not born of anger or a desire to perform. It was an absolute and unwavering refusal to give in to the suggestions of the physical senses when they contradicted the promise of healing. He lived in a state of constant awareness that the spiritual realm was the parent of the physical realm. For Smith, the phrase, "By his stripes I am healed," was never a mantra used to get a distant power to finally do something. He did not see it as a request or a plea for mercy. He saw it as an announcement of a fact that had already been settled in the heavens. He did not pray for hours to convince a reluctant creator to lend a hand. Instead, he stood on the truth until the very atmosphere around him began to shift and move. He had a way of looking past the sickness and seeing the person as they were intended to be. He did not look at the symptoms to see if his prayer had worked. He looked at the promise to see if the symptoms were lying to him. His approach to prayer and healing was grounded in a terrifyingly simple logic. He believed that if the price for wholeness had been paid, then it was an injustice for the sickness to remain. He treated infirmity like an intruder in a home where it did not belong. This was not about personal ego or showing off power. It was about a deep and reverent respect for the work that had been finished long ago. He often said that he would rather die believing than live in doubt. This kind of radical commitment is what allowed him to walk into rooms filled with despair and bring a light that changed everything. We can look at his life today as a source of profound inspiration rather than a guarantee of a specific formula. Wigglesworth shows us that faith is not a fluctuating emotion or a feeling you have to conjure up during a worship song. It is a cold and hard decision to trust the invisible more than the visible. He lived in a constant conversation with the divine where the physical world was merely a backdrop to the real action happening in the spirit. He did not wait for his body to feel good before he started praising. He praised until his body had no choice but to align with his spirit. His life was a challenge to the idea that we are victims of our circumstances. He demonstrated that even a simple person with no special standing can tap into a well of life that never runs dry. But he also showed that this path requires a certain kind of spiritual grit. It requires the ability to stay steady when the reports are bad and the pain is high. He did not sugarcoat the struggle, but he also refused to bow to it. He was a man who had seen the second eye so clearly that the first eye no longer had the power to make him afraid. When we consider his legacy, we see a man who stripped away all the religious noise and left us with a core of pure trust. He didn't use complex theological arguments to explain away why things weren't happening. He simply leaned harder into the truth. He taught that the secret was not in the length of the prayer or the beauty of the words, but in the absolute confidence of the heart. He was a plumber who understood that if the flow of life is blocked, you don't just talk to the pipes. You clear the obstruction and you let the water run. His story serves as a bridge for us today. It reminds us that the power we are looking for is not locked away in a different century or reserved for a different kind of person. It is available in the middle of the ordinary and the mundane. It is available to the person sitting in a quiet room, wondering why their life hasn't changed. Smith Wigglesworth stands as a witness that the gap between the promise and the reality can be closed by a heart that refuses to waver. He invites us to stop looking at our own limitations and to start looking at the limitless nature of the one who made the promise. He reminds us that the stripes were real, and therefore the healing must be real too. If you are watching this and feeling a sense of deep frustration, please hear this clearly. You are not being judged, and you are not being failed by a distant power. There are very human and very understandable reasons why we often feel stuck in a cycle of words without results. We have to look at these barriers with a calm and non-judgmental eye if we want to move past them. It is not about shaming yourself for a lack of faith, but about identifying the heavy weights that are slowing your progress down. One of the most common reasons we see no change is that we are using words to mask a deep and trembling fear. We say the verse because we are terrified of what will happen if we do not. We hope that the sound of the words will act as a protective charm to make the anxiety go away. But fear is a very loud noise that often drowns out the quiet whisper of true trust. When we speak from a place of panic, we are not releasing faith, but rather rehearsing our desperation. We are trying to talk ourselves out of a hole, rather than realizing we have already been given the ladder to climb out. Another barrier is the shadow of doubt that we try to ignore instead of addressing. We think that if we admit we have questions, we are somehow failing a test. But honest doubt is often the doorway to a much deeper conviction. When we suppress our questions, they do not disappear. They simply go underground and rot the roots of our belief. We repeat the phrase, "By his stripes I am healed," while another part of us is whispering that it will never happen for us. This internal conflict creates a static that prevents us from truly hearing the message of peace. We end up fighting ourselves instead of resting in the promise. Impatience is also a major factor in our modern experience of spirituality. We live in a world of instant gratification and high-speed connections where everything is available at the touch of a button. We have accidentally carried this expectation into our spiritual lives. We expect a transformation to happen at the speed of a digital download. When we do not see a physical shift within 24 hours, we begin to think that the process has failed. We are like children who plant a seed in the garden and then dig it up every hour to see if it has started to grow. In our rush to see the fruit, we often kill the very plant that was trying to break through the soil. There is also the weight of expectation that keeps us focused on the wrong thing. We become so obsessed with the end result, or the physical healing, or the visible breakthrough, that we miss the relationship entirely. We are looking for the gift, but we have completely forgotten the giver. We treat the verse like a tool to fix a problem rather than a window into a friendship. When the words become more important than the connection, they lose their vibrant life. They become echoes in an empty hallway rather than a conversation in a warm room. We are trying to use a principle to bypass a person. We also struggle with the habit of looking for external confirmation before we allow ourselves to have internal peace. We want the pain to vanish so that we can finally believe we are healed. We want the bank account to fill up so that we can finally believe we are provided for. This is a natural human tendency, but it keeps us trapped in a cycle of reacting to our circumstances. If our peace is dependent on our symptoms, then our peace will change every time our symptoms change. We become like a ship without an anchor, being tossed around by every wave of feeling or every new report from the world around us. Sometimes we are simply exhausted from the effort of trying to make it happen. We think that faith is a work of the will, and that if we just try harder or pray longer or fast more, we will finally break through the barrier. This creates a spiritual burnout that makes the very idea of healing feel heavy and burdensome. We have turned a gift into a chore. We have taken a promise of rest and turned it into a marathon of performance. We are trying to earn something that was intended to be received. This effort creates a tension in the soul that makes it very difficult to experience the fluid and easy grace that leads to change. Finally, there is the issue of understanding. We say the words because we were told to say them, but we do not actually know what they mean for us personally. We are reciting a script that belongs to someone else. We have not yet sat in the silence long enough to hear how that truth resonates in our own heart. Without a personal revelation of the truth, the words remain on the surface. They stay in the throat and never reach the spirit. To see change, we must move past the religious obligation and into a space of genuine clarity. We must stop asking why it isn't working and start asking what it is that we are truly invited to believe. It is in this quiet and honest inquiry that the shift begins to happen. Growth is not a loud event, but a quiet unfolding. When we stop judging ourselves for the delay, we create the space for the missing key to turn in the lock. We realize that the reasons we see no change are not punishments, but pointers. They are showing us where we are still holding on to our own control. They are inviting us to let go of the struggle and to simply be still. The supportive path forward is not found in doing more, but in seeing more clearly. It is about removing the clutter so that the light can finally reach the places that have been in the dark for far too long. The shift we are looking for is not a loud or violent event that happens in a moment of extreme willpower. It is a gentle and internal movement of the soul that changes everything about how we inhabit our daily lives. To see change, we must first be willing to undergo an internal transformation that moves us from the exhausting act of saying the words to the quiet state of being the truth. This begins by slowing down and allowing the frantic noise of our expectations to fade into the background. We have to stop trying to use faith as a tool to fix our lives and start allowing faith to be the lens through which we view our existence. When you change your perspective, you begin to realize that you do not have to generate faith like a power plant generates electricity. You do not have to strain your mind or push your emotions to a breaking point to make the promise work. Faith is more like a lung that naturally breathes in the air that is already surrounding it. It is a receptive state of being. Instead of saying the words "by his stripes, I am healed," to make something happen, you begin to say them because you are coming to understand that they are already a reality. This is a subtle but massive difference in the spiritual economy. One is a work of the ego trying to control the outcome, while the other is an act of the soul surrendering to a greater and more ancient love. As you take the pressure off yourself, you create a space where genuine growth can occur. You stop looking at the clock and you stop checking the mirror every 5 minutes for a sign of progress. You start to notice the small and quiet shifts that happen within you before they ever manifest without. You might notice a sudden sense of peace that arrives in the middle of a stressful afternoon. You might find a new strength to get through one more hour of a difficult day. You might hear a quiet inner voice that simply says, "I am with you, and I have not forgotten you." These are not distractions from your healing. They are the first ripples of the restoration you have been seeking. This shift in perspective requires us to value awareness over achievement. We have been taught to focus on the goal, but the spiritual path is about the process of becoming. When you focus on relationship and connection, the words of the verse take on a new weight and a new warmth. They are no longer a cold formula, but a personal letter addressed to your heart. You begin to see that your wholeness is not something you are chasing, but something you are unfolding into. It is like a flower that is already contained within the seed. The flower does not struggle to become a flower. It simply yields to the light and the water and the life that is already pushing it toward the surface. Internal transformation also means changing how we talk to ourselves in the quiet moments. It means replacing the internal dialogue of lack and limitation with a steady focus on the abundance of the promise. This is not about positive thinking or ignoring the facts of your situation. It is about choosing which facts will have the most authority in your life. You acknowledge the pain, but you give the final word to the peace. You acknowledge the fatigue, but you anchor your identity in the strength that is being provided. This creates a new kind of internal climate where the seeds of the promise can finally take root and grow without being choked by the thorns of anxiety. As this internal environment changes, your outward experience will naturally begin to follow. This is the law of the spirit that Smith Wigglesworth understood so well. The outside must eventually reflect the inside. If the inside is filled with a steady and quiet confidence, then the outside has no choice but to align with that reality over time. You are no longer reacting to the world. You are responding to the truth. You are no longer a victim of your symptoms. You are a participant in your restoration. This shift changes the very chemistry of your life. It turns the heavy burden of trying to believe into the light and easy yoke of simply knowing. Focusing on growth means being kind to yourself during the days when the progress feels slow. It means realizing that a forest is not built in a day and a soul is not restored in an hour. It is a journey of 1,000 small steps, and each one is significant. When you stop demanding instant results, you actually speed up the process of change because you have removed the friction of stress. You are allowing the life of the promise to flow through you without being blocked by the walls of your own impatience. You are becoming a vessel that is open and ready to receive whatever the divine has in store for you. Ultimately, this shift is about returning to a state of simple relationship. It is about realizing that you are loved and seen and supported by a power that is far greater than your own. When you stand in that awareness, the words "by his stripes I am healed" are no longer a shout into the dark. They are a quiet conversation with a friend. They are a resting place for your weary soul. They are the foundation upon which you can build a life that is truly whole and truly free. You are not just repeating a verse. You are coming home to the truth of who you were always meant to be. Stop for a single moment and allow the noise of the world to fall away until there is nothing left but the rhythm of your own breath. In this space, there is absolutely no need to perform or to prove your worth to anyone. There is no requirement to reach a certain level of intensity or to manufacture a feeling of certainty that you do not yet possess. We spend so much of our lives running toward a destination that we forget the power that exists in the stillness of the present. Silence is not an absence of sound, but a presence of something far deeper. It is the soil in which the seeds of the Spirit begin to crack open and reach for the light. When we talk about the quiet moments of faith, we are talking about the space between the promise and the manifestation. This is the place where most people give up because they equate silence with abandonment. They think that because they cannot hear a voice or see a sign, then nothing is happening. But if you look at the natural world, you will see that the most profound changes occur in total secrecy. The forest grows in the quiet of the night, and the stars move across the sky without making a sound, and the cells of your body are constantly repairing themselves without ever asking for your permission or your attention. In this quiet and emotional space, you are invited to wait without anxiety. Waiting is not a passive state of doing nothing, but an active state of trusting that the process is unfolding exactly as it should. It is like an athlete resting between sessions or a composer sitting before a blank sheet of music. The rest is just as important as the movement. When you are silent, you are allowing the truth of "by his stripes I am healed" to sink past the surface of your skin and into the very marrow of your bones. You are giving the words permission to become a part of your identity rather than just a part of your vocabulary. Think about the concept of unseen progress. Imagine a massive ship in the middle of the ocean that has turned its engines toward a new shore. To a person standing on the deck, it might feel as though nothing has changed because the horizon looks exactly the same as it did an hour ago. But beneath the surface, the great propellers are churning, and the massive weight of the vessel is shifting, and the coordinates are being updated with every passing second. You are that ship. Just because you do not see the mountain moving today does not mean the foundations are not shaking beneath the earth. Trust is the ability to stay on the deck, and know that the shore is getting closer even when you cannot see the sand. This reflection is about honoring the distance you have already traveled. You have survived the hardest days of your life, and you have kept your heart open despite the pain. That in itself is a miracle of grace. When you sit in the silence, you are acknowledging that your strength does not come from your own effort, but from a source that is infinite and kind. You are letting go of the need to understand the mechanics of how healing works, and you are embracing the mystery of the one who provides it. There is a profound dignity in this kind of surrender. It is the mark of a soul that has found its true north. As you dwell in this quiet moment, try to feel the weight of the words as a comfort rather than a challenge. Let them wrap around you like a warm blanket on a cold night. You are not fighting for victory, but you are standing in a victory that was won long before you were born. The stripes were not just for the physical body of a man in history, but for the restoration of the broken places in your own history. They were for the memories that haunt you, and the fears that keep you awake, and the physical limitations that try to define your future. In the silence, these truths begin to breathe. Make this a time of deep and cinematic awareness. Visualize the light of the promise filling the dark corners of your mind. See the invisible hand of peace calming the turbulent waters of your emotions. This is not a fantasy, but a spiritual exercise in seeing with the second eye. You are training yourself to recognize the presence of the divine in the middle of the mundane. You are learning that the silence is not empty, but full of potential. It is the womb of the miraculous. Every great shift in human history and every great healing in the life of a believer began in a moment just like this one. Maybe the missing key isn't a secret technique or a deeper level of holiness after all. Maybe it is simply the willingness to be still and know that you are loved beyond measure. Maybe it is the courage to stay in the silence until the noise of the world no longer has the power to disturb your peace. When you reach this level of quiet trust, the words you speak carry a different weight. They are no longer a plea for help, but a recognition of a reality. You are standing on holy ground, and the ground is firm. You can afford to wait. You can afford to be still. You can afford to trust that the work is being finished, even now in the unseen depths of your being. Thank you for watching.